Friends, I normally begin my lecture with some questions. Let us look at these questions first. Since the topic relates to rural development programs and precision agriculture for smart villages, look at the first question. The first question relates to what institutions have been set up in India to promote rural development. That is a very important question. Each one of us must know that do we have some institutions at the national level, at the state level, at the district level, or even at the level of panchayats. That is very important because development without institutions are not possible. We will be answering this question systematically. Second question, which is very important and relevant for you all, that is, what are the policies prepared for the development of rural areas and people in India? I mean rural people in India. So what we find that we must also know about the different types of policies which have been prepared for the development of rural areas and rural people in India. But if we have policies, third question relates to what are the programs that have been started for rural areas and people in India. So three things are there for each one of you to understand. Number one, we need institutions, we need policies, and we need programs. Let us first focus on some basic issues. And that is a very important concern at the national level. The first is institutions. Friends, immediately after independence, in the year 1951, we formed a ministry, and that ministry was called as Ministry of Agriculture. Ministry of Agriculture. Though this kind of Ministry of Agriculture was already existing before 1951 also. But then this Ministry of Agriculture was renamed as Ministry of Food and Agriculture. Now look at the priority which has changed. In the very first 5-year plan, we had a Ministry of Agriculture already even in the British period, but now it was renamed in 51 as Ministry of Food and Agriculture. So we will ask a question, why food? Yes, food was very important in those days. A large number of areas which were growing food was not with us because of partition. So very rich food growing areas from western part of Panjab in those days, and the jute cultivation or rice cultivation area from Bangladesh, we lost it. So food was a very important. So we renamed it. Over the years, by the end of first 5-year plan itself, we realized that Ministry of Food and Ministry of Agriculture should be separated. So in the year 1956, they were separated. So now two different bodies were there. One was called as Ministry of Food, separate ministry, and Ministry of Agriculture as a separate ministry. And in the year 1957, again, somehow within the Ministry of Agriculture, two different departments were created. One was called as Department of Agriculture, and another was called as Department of Food. So what you find that at the national level, changes were taking place, priorities were changing, and concerns were changing. And the concern was food, and therefore what we find that in the 57 again we had Ministry of Agriculture only. That means the Ministry of Food was only for 1 year only, because we changed it. After a decade, again, the concern of the nation was changed. And we renamed the ministry and we started calling the ministry as Ministry of Food, Agriculture, Community Development, and Cooperation. Look at it. Now, this was a very different renaming of the ministry itself. It was called as Ministry of Food, Agriculture, Community Development, and Cooperation. Here, what you find that the placement of food is prior to agriculture. And that is another important concern which each one of you must understand how the priority in renaming the institutions changes. In the year 1971, the Ministry of Agriculture was again restructured and 4 different departments were included within it. Now you can see that right now from 51 to 1971 we do not find any Ministry of Rural Development. We are focusing only on food, we are focusing only on agriculture, but nobody is talking about rural development. So in the year 1971, 4 different components were added as departments within the Ministry of Agriculture, and they were Department of Agriculture as one component, Department of Food as another component, Department of Community Development as third component, and Department of Cooperation as fourth component. So you can see that the 4 different components which were earlier part of one ministry, now they became departments: agriculture, food, community development, and cooperation. In the year 1974, there was a slight change in the orientation. And the ministry was renamed as Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation. First time. Look at it. That means there was a realization that, see, you cannot increase food unless you have irrigation schemes for the nation. So what you find that the priority changes and we started thinking of irrigation. I hope you can understand why this was very important. And the Department of Community Development was renamed as Department of Rural Development. First time. That means as a teacher, you have realized that it was only in the 1974 that within the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation, there was a separate department, and the department was Department of Rural Development. This is a landmark development in the development process of India. So we first established a Department of Rural Development. In the year 1979, this Department of Rural Development became Ministry of Rural Reconstruction. Again, note it down very carefully. So what you find that in the year 1974, while we had a separate department within the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation as Department of Rural Development, in the year 1979, this department was upgraded and was called as Ministry of Rural Reconstruction. So I told you in the beginning that we must understand that was there a concern at the national level for one institution which focuses on rural development. So what we find that it was only in the year 1979 that we had a separate Ministry of Rural Reconstruction. But interestingly, in the year 1985, again, the ministry was renamed and agriculture and rural reconstruction were put together. So in the year 1985, we had one common ministry and it was called as Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Reconstruction. Friends, in the year 1985 itself, in September, there was a realization that in place of calling it as rural reconstruction, why not to call it as rural development? So the ministry was renamed again and was called as Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. Look at it. So it was Department of Rural Development, and then it became the Ministry of Rural Reconstruction. Then it was part of the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. So what you find here is, for the first time, we are talking about a ministry with rural development. But it was only in the year 1991 when we had, for the first time, called as Ministry of Rural Development. Earlier it was Ministry of Rural Reconstruction, but now it became Ministry of Rural Development. And ever since, we have continuously using this term, Ministry of Rural Development. Is it visible?
Sir.
Is it visible?
No, sir. Sir, presentation is not there.
No, I have now stopped. I want to see you all, right? So, all the participants, they have come to know how at the national level a separate Ministry of Rural Development is working. You know the history now. Okay, initially we had nothing like rural development. We had no focus on rural. We had focused only on food or agriculture or community development, irrigation, etc. But it was only from 1974 onwards or 79 onwards specifically, and then in 1991 we have a separate ministry. Friends, when we are talking about making our villages smart, there are some very important questions. How do you visualize the rural areas or the rural development? How many of us are really having an idea about the rural areas? Or how do we define the rural areas is a very important challenge. If you look at the data of 2011 census, what you find that in India, 68.84% people were living in rural areas. That means nearly 69% of the total population was living in rural area. As per the census of India, the data we have. If we compare 1951 and 2011, the latest data we have, what we find that the year 1951, nearly 83% of the total population of India was living in rural areas. From 83% of rural population in 1951, the share of rural population decreased and it was 69%. But still what we find, we have huge population is living in the rural areas. But a major question comes before us, and that is how much area is there? Look at the population part is different. Look at the area. How much area of the country is under urban and how much area of the country is under rural? What is surprising for us is that less than 3% of the total land area of India is in the urban part. Less than 3% of the total land is under the urban. Whereas what you find that on this less than 3% of land, nearly 32% of the population or 31% of the population is living on the land. That means the major part of the area, that is about nearly 97% of the total land is rural. But two questions which must come to your mind very carefully. As a policy maker, what we find that still in India we have huge area as rural and very small area is used as urban. Very small area, very, very small area. But on this small area, we have huge population concentration. But when it comes to planning, my dear friends, you may come across a situation where you will be posing a question to yourself, how many villages are there in India if I want to plan? How many villages are there in India? And from where do we get the data? You will be surprised that no government agency, no government institution has exact information about the number of villages in India. You will be surprised to know about it. Not a single ministry in India, no government of India, no Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Rural Development, they do not have exact number of villages in India. Don't you think it is very surprising? Very surprising, but it is actually correct. Now let me give you the information why it is so. The census of India records as many as 6 lakh villages. 6 lakh villages in India. And out of these 6 lakh 49,000 villages, around 50,000 villages are uninhabited. Now this comes from census of India. But if I compare two different records, what I find that the management information system, which is called as MIS, gives a very different information about the villages. And if you look at the different ministries, this information will vary from 6 lakh villages to 10 lakh villages. But the question is, why somewhere we have information about 10 lakh villages in India, and why we have information about 6 lakh villages? So which one is correct? Which one is correct? So for different programs, if you want to run, whether you will be running a program for 6 lakh villages, or you will be running a program for 10 lakh villages, or you will be running a program for only village panchayats, and we have about 2 lakh village panchayats. Look at it. The difference is, at one place we have village panchayats nearly 2 lakh. Villages as recorded by census, they are 6 lakh plus. And the programs which are run for different schemes by different governments, sometimes they range up to 10 lakh. And that is a very important issue. But why it is so? Why it is so? It is so because for different programs, the implementation methodology is very different. In certain cases, it is the requirement of a revenue village. In certain situations, the requirement is of panchayats. In certain schemes, the number of people from few villages put together, the programs are implemented. And that is how what we find that we have a serious confusion as to which particular data set is to be used for the implementation of programs. And this is a very important challenge, which one of. So my take is that first of all, we have to decide the actual number of villages, and there should be a proper integration from one department to the other department, so that uniformity is there in implementation of the programs. Unless we do it, it is very difficult. So suppose we decide that this is the total number of villages in India. Suppose we decide it. The next question comes, and that relates to how many households are there within these villages. Because when we have to think of rural development programs, remember, there are two different ways to look at the programs. One, the programs can be focusing only on the area, that is rural area, or the programs can also focus on people. So two broad categories of programs can be there. One, the programs meant for rural areas, and another, the programs meant for rural population. When I say the programs meant for, that means programs may be people centric, the programs may be area centric. I repeat, the programs may be people centric, the programs may be area centric. Now, as a teacher, you will be looking at the whole development process from different angles. For example, what you expect at the household level. What you expect at the household level. But then many of you may not be knowing what is a household. So how do you differentiate between a house and a household is another important challenging point. Now, before I proceed further, can anybody tell me out of this what is the difference between a house and a household? Anybody? Anybody? The difference between a house and a household, because that is very important for rural development. Sugesh can you tell the difference between a house and a household?
Hello,
Yes, please, Sugesh yes.
sir. Actually, household is a single entity. House is a single entity, and household is a group of people living together.
Living together.
Yes, for the purpose of food and shelter, we can call it as.
Yes. Quite close. But then in the case of household, what we find that the kitchen is the most important component.
Yes.
Kitchen is most important component because it holds people together, right? So we can have two broad categories of households. One, the individual households. Two, the institutional households. For example, hostels, right? So when it comes to the implementation of programs, what we are expecting at the household level or the house level. So some things are required at household level and some things are required at house level. Right? Now try to understand it. So suppose you have a house. What do you expect in your house to be available in the public domain? Number one. So you have a house. Now forget about what is the construction material of the house, because that is another issue. Whether it is a thatched house, whether it is a mud house, whether it is a concrete house, whether it is a single story building, there are different issues. But the focus, what you expect within the house, you are focusing on some basic facilities which are available within the house. You are looking for water, you are looking for sewerage, you are looking for electricity, you are looking for the gas connections now in the now they are basic facilities which are required. So some facilities are required at the household level. Suppose we do not have exact information about the household. Now how will you plan? You cannot plan. So the first issue is that means we require complete data on household at every level. Once we have this data, then making of policies or programs will be very easy. Because if we don't have data or information about it, we cannot do it. So the first requirement is at the household level or house level. But then some of the requirements are not at the household level, but we want in the rural areas. So what do you expect? You expect that we have a health institution for the community, not for the household, for the community. You are looking for an educational institution, not for the household, but for the community. You are looking for a better road, not for the household, but for the community. And therefore, what you require that at the village level, while some facilities were required at the household level, at the individual level, some facilities are to be created on the ground by forming. That means you want people to have a school, you want the facility of education, good quality roads, even banking systems, even the postal departments. Look at this, even a market. Now these are the requirements at the community level. That means everybody wants to use it. Now, if two things are there, I call them as the facilities and amenities in the form of infrastructure. In the form of infrastructure. But this is not going to change the quality of population. The quality of population will be changed by making them educated. That means you have to think of the nature of education, which is very important. So having a school and a school without a teacher will not help. Therefore, friends, in this lecture, we are going to look at what are the programs which are of social assistance in nature. Which programs provide social assistance to people? Now, these programs can again be of three broad categories. Number one, the programs which are for pan-India. That means for everybody. Some programs are for everybody. Some programs focus only for people living in the rural areas. And some programs focus only for the urban areas. Now, for example, suppose you want to have a program for pan-India. Now, remember that when the COVID was there, we had a program for pan-India, and that was COVID vaccination. You know that within different states, there were problems. Some states wanted to start it in their own way. Ultimately, it was a pan-India program focused by national level itself. We have some programs which were exclusively for rural areas. For example, we have programs like Manrega, meant only for rural areas. Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. Rural employment, focusing on rural. So what we find that we have to look at the programs which can be divided into 6 different categories. First, programs which are to provide social security to the rural population. Number 2, we have to look at programs which are meant for rural housing. We have to look at the programs which are meant for rural employment. We have to look at programs which are meant for rural infrastructure, which includes education, health, road, electrification, water, and sanitation. We have to look at programs which are meant for agricultural development, focusing on soil health of the areas. We have to look at the produce which they produce, and also the market where they can sell their product and they can purchase the basic inputs for their crops. And lastly, the rural industry. So I again repeat. So we have programs for rural social assistance. We have program for rural housing. We have programs for rural employment. We have programs for rural infrastructure, which includes rural education, rural health, rural roads, rural electrification, rural provision of water, provision of irrigation facilities, and sanitation. So look at it's a wide scope of the programs. Agriculture, again, very important, and industry also very important. Having said so, my dear friends, let's look at what has been done in India over the years. I am sharing my screen and it is going to help you. So while we have answered the questions, look at it, what happened. One by one. Now, if you have to define in one word what kind of plan it was, the first plan. The first plan of India, which started in 1951 and ended in 56, is basically a model developed by Harrod Domer model. Now, the focus was on community development program. The focus and the program was further extended and it became National Extension Service Program. In the second plan, which was more focused on industries, is called as a program modeled by P.C. Mahalanobis, a very important economist. And what happens? We focused on land reforms and agrarian reconstruction. In the year 1959, we thought of Panchayati Raj, and it was adopted in 1958, where we talked about democratic decentralization, and it was recommended by Balwant Rai Mehta Committee of 1957. The third plan is focusing on a model developed by Professor Sandy and Sukhma Chakraborty. In this, in the year 1962, we started with intensive agriculture district program. In 62, we decided to develop applied nutrition program, basically for the people. In the fourth plan, this was modeled by the Leontief model, called as Leontief model. And in this, what we find, we had a program for small farmers in the year 1969. In the year 1970, we had Marginal Farmers and Agricultural Laborers Development Agency. So what we find that focus is on small farmers and marginal farmers in 60s. We do have the same focus now also. In the year 1971, we had a program for CRAS, Scheme of Rural Development. In 71, we decided to have a program for Tribal Area Development Program, which is a pilot project for the tribal areas. In 72, we had another program for Pilot Intensive Rural Employment Project. In 73, we had a program for Drought-Prone Area Program, directly focusing on rural areas and the areas which were recurrently facing drought. In 74, we had a program called as Minimum Needs Program. In fifth plan, we had special livestock production program. You can see the change in the orientation. Now livestock is coming. In 75, we had a 20-point program. In 77, from drought-prone area in 73, we focused on desert development because it was realized that there is a need of desert development also. And what we find that there was a period of planned holiday because there was a change in the government at the national level. So 78 to 80, we had no national 5-year plans. In the year 1979, we started thinking of training of rural youth for self-employment. Look at it. Training of rural youth for self-employment. First time, the focus was on self-employment. It is not direct employment, it is self-employment. Sixth plan. What happens? In the 1980, we had National Rural Employment Program. But this is not a guarantee program. This is a National Rural Employment Program. And remember, earlier, friends, it is very important for all of you to understand that earlier the wage-based programs were there, and the programs were called as food for work program. That means people were provided grains against the work they were doing it so that they don't starve and die because of food. So what you find, that program initially was called as food for work program. That means you work and you get food. Now what you find, that even if you don't work, you get food. That is the major change. That is the major change which is there. And you know that we are claiming at public domain in the world that we are providing free food to 80 crore population in India. Look at the change in the strategy. That means we are giving food to 80 crore people of the country, and we do not expect them to work at all. Interesting. This will be discussed in the years to come by a large number of people, whether it was strategically correct or not. So but in the 1980, what was there? This food for work program was changed and was called as National Rural Employment Program. But here again, I again caution you that till now it is not a guarantee program. In the year 1982, again we had a new 20-point program. In the 1982, we had, now look at the focus is changing now. development of women and children in rural areas called as Dwakra, a sub-theme of IRDP. So we had a program called as Intensive Rural Development Program. Now what you find that we have focusing on women and children. In other programs, the focus was not on women and children, except for the program which was related to nutrition, where women or pregnant women were given some priority. In the year 1983, the focus changed from National Rural Employment to Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program. For the first time in the Indian history, we came across a program which was meant as a guarantee program. That means they will be given a program, they will be given job, but who are the people? They should be rural landless people. That means if they don't have land, they will be provided a job opportunity. 83 itself, Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program. In the 7th plan, what we find that we started thinking of a new kind of program in the year 1988-89, and the program was called as Jawahar Rozgar Yojana. Now, what you find in this particular scheme, my dear friends, that the earlier National Rural Employment Program, NREP, and Rural Landless Employment Guarantee Program, so NREP and RLEGP were put together, and we started thinking of one single program. Both the programs were meant for the rural areas, called as Jawahar Rozgar Yojana. So what you find, we had two separate programs. One was meant for rural landless people, another was meant for national rural employment. One was giving guarantee of a job, another was not giving guarantee. But then in the year 88-89 itself, we had a separate program for the employment in the year 88-89. In the year 89, we started a program of integrated rural development program. And what you see here, you see that these programs will be run only if there is a share, that is contribution from the state government. So what you find that it was a shared program, that is 50% of the financial support will come from central government and 50% of it should be contributed by the state government. Many state governments came out with this idea that they will share the burden. Many state governments did not come, and therefore the impact of such programs will vary from state to state. In the year 1989, we developed the Million Wells Scheme. Now, two things were happening in India. One, we found that even after 40 years of our independence, our agriculture mostly remained as rain-fed. At the same time, we realized that in large number of areas, we are not having enough of water even for drinking purpose. Even today, friends, when the government of India says that we are to provide drinking water, see, we can't differentiate even in our household what is meant for drinking water and what is meant for other uses. Because we do not have separate waters available at any household, even if we claim that Har Ghar Mein Nal Se Jal is a scheme, but this Har Ghar Mein Nal Se Jal does not mean that this is drinkable water or not. The issue is whether the water is treated or not. If the water remains untreated and if the source of water is polluted, then this purpose will be defeated, and that is what we have to be looking for it. So what you find, we have in the year 1989 itself, we had a program called as Million Wells Scheme. That means in the country 10 lakh wells were supposed to be created. In the 8th plan, which became a model called as LPG, and you know that what this LPG stands for. LPG stands for liberalization, privatization, and globalization model. That means a major shift in the orientation took place in the 8th plan. And what happened? In the year 1992, we started a program called as Sitara, which stands for Supply of Improved Toolkits to Urban Artisan. So focus is changing. In the year 1993, there was Employment Assurance Scheme. It is not guarantee scheme, but it is called Employment Assurance Scheme. In the year 1995, we thought of having a program called as National Social Assistance Program, NSAP. In the year 1996, we had a program for Indira Awas Yojana. Now look at it. For the first time, we are finding a program meant for housing. We have not seen any program earlier which was meant for housing. We had programs for employment, for rural landless people, for women assistance, for children. But here is for the first time, we have a program for SC and ST households. First time, Indira Awas Yojana, SC and ST. And then it became Rajiv Awas Yojana. In the ninth plan, what we find that we had a program called as Swarna Jayanti Gramin Swarozgar Yojana. This was, so we had already a program, two programs. One was for rural landless, another was for youth. Here what we find that those words, youth is removed and it becomes Swarna Jayanti Gramin Swarozgar Yojana. And in the year 2000, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Now, in the previous schemes, you have not seen anything which was focusing on education. It was only in the year 2000 which started focusing on education. And what we find that, yes, at the national level, the different kinds of orientations keep on changing and the focus also changes. In the 10th plan, what you find, look at it. We come across NRHM, that is National Rural Health Mission. So we realized that we have been doing different kinds of experiments at the national level, but we were not focusing on the health of the people. And therefore, there was a need to start a program called as National Rural Health Mission. In the year 2005 itself, we look at this. This was a major game changer in India. And when I say so, my dear friends, we have to remember here that this is a very important development in the country. Now, what happens in this situation? This was for the first time that we made a major change in our constitution or act, and we had a National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Look at this. This becomes act. Earlier, it was not through act. That means it was not a legal document. In the year 2005, for the first time in India, we decided that we will be providing a Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Earlier, we had assurances. Earlier, we had program for rural landless people. We had program for women, but we had nothing like guarantee. This is the same program, friends, which was renamed in the year 2009 as MG Narega, called as Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. That means, what does it mean? This is very important. Maybe I will discuss it in detail after I have completed all the programs. So what you find that for the first time, the Employment Guarantee Act was there. In the year 2005, we thought of developing Bharat Nirman, and the focus was on the rural areas basically in terms of infrastructure. In the 11th program, we had a program for flagship programs, and there were so many flagship programs at the national level, which includes NREGP, NRHM, ICDS, SAS, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, MDM, the mid-day programs, then national security, the programs. Then we had programs for backward region guarantee, this fund, and so many programs were there. In the 12th plan, we started looking at it because they were focused at the national level that whatever schemes are there, if the money is involved, when the money comes from the central government, it is not directly reaching to the beneficiary. And that was a very important issue. And therefore, it was thought that we need Aadhaar-based direct transfer schemes for the rural people. And it was meant for subsidy and welfare-related payments, all kinds of payments. Then comes a new regime in which you are now living. Friends, what you find that from year 1951 till the year 2014, when the new government took place, this was a period of 5-year plans. In the year 2015, 1st January onwards, we had a body called as Niti Ayog regime. What has happened? Look at it. Now we have a program called as Gram Swaraj Abhiyan. That means a complete transformation of villages was to be focused. And 7 different flagship programs for pro-poor, which includes Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, Saubhagya Yojana, उजाला स्कीम, प्रधानमंत्री जनधन योजना, प्रधानमंत्री जीवन ज्योति बीमा योजना, प्रधानमंत्री सुरक्षा बीमा योजना. Now these three schemes, the प्रधानमंत्री जनधन योजना and see particularly the प्रधानमंत्री जीवन ज्योति बीमा योजना and प्रधानमंत्री सुरक्षा बीमा योजना, they are meant for providing some kind of security to the agricultural people at the national level in the rural areas. Now, I'll stop sharing and come back to you. Friends, I have given you a broad overview of a large number of programs, right? A large number of programs have been shared with you, and now you are wise enough to discuss that we had different kinds of programs. If you look at them very carefully, we had program for women, children, SC, ST, rural landless, youth of all kinds, including programs for housing, health, infrastructure, irrigation, agriculture, and different kinds. Now, after listening all this, you may be interested in the currently operating programs. We have large number of programs which are right now operating at the national level for different purposes. For different purposes. Now, if you look at it very carefully, what you find that at the national level, we have programs for employment, we have programs for housing, we have programs for rural roads, we have programs for rural electrification, we have programs for agriculture, we have programs for soil, we have program for making our villages smart. We have, that means different kinds of programs are there. If I give you listing, there are huge number of programs meant for different people at these places. Now, one important program which I can discuss with you because of paucity of time, and then I'll switch over to precision part of it, relates to the Rural Employment Guarantee Act. That is 2005 Act. Now, what is this? Very important, point by point. Friends, it was realized at the national level that our farmers are not having work throughout the year because agriculture is season based and there are some lean period when there is no work with them. So there is no source of income for them unless the crop is ready for harvest. So what to do for them? And therefore, at the national level, it was decided that we can think of providing at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment. Remember, it is not a permanent job, rather it is a wage employment, 100 days of guaranteed wage employment. Now, who is eligible for it? Very important point. Now, anybody who is 18 years or above is eligible for it in the rural areas. That means adults in household. But for this, what is required? The persons of that family or household must volunteer. They must volunteer that they are ready to do a job. But what kind of job? Here it is very important to know that they will be provided unskilled manual work. I repeat, in the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee for the rural youth, both male and female, age is 18 years, but the nature of job will be unskilled manual work. I repeat, unskilled, not skilled job, unskilled manual work. Now, what to do for this? Now, everyone who is ready to get this kind of unskilled manual work will submit an application, and after the submission of the application, that is after 15 days of applying, if the person is not getting any unskilled manual work, then he will be provided unemployed allowance. I repeat for you. Number one, you have to apply for an unskilled manual work. After submitting the application, after 15 days itself, if the government fails to provide you a job which is unskilled manual work, then you are eligible to get unemployment allowance. Now, it is very interesting for you to understand that what is this unemployment allowance? Now, this unemployment allowance will be 1/3 of the current wage in state for 30 days after the expiry of 15 days. That means, try to understand it. Suppose I submit my application for a unskilled manual work today. After 15 days, I will start getting unemployment allowance, but this unemployment allowance will be equal to 1/3 of the wage. In every state, friends, let me tell you that the wage rates vary from state to state. For example, the wage rate decided in Haryana in the year 2022-23 is 331 rupees. Now, in the case of Kerala, it is 311 rupees. In the case of Goa, it is 315 rupees per day. So, what you find that suppose I don't get a job after 15 days, then 1/3, that means around 111 rupees in nearly in these states, Haryana, Goa and Kerala, a person is eligible. Right? Now, what happens? This is given to the person for next 30 days without providing any job if they fail to provide it. Now, suppose even after 30 days, the state governments are not able to provide the job further, then the provision is that now in place of 1/3 of the current wage rate, the state government will have to pay 1/2 of current wage in state after 30 days till 100 days. Look at it. Initially, it was 1/3 of the wages for 30 days, and if the state governments fail to provide, then they will have to pay half of the wage. That means, if the current wage rate is 331, then the person will be provided around 160 rupees per day. For how many days? For next 100 days. Remember here, at the national level in the policy itself, it has been decided that this unemployment allowance will be paid not by the central government, but it will be paid by the state government. And therefore, the state responsibility is very high, because central government will not be providing any money for payment of unemployment. That means the state administration will have to be very proactive so that they can think of generating jobs for these unemployed youth who is demanding an unskilled manual job. These are the components which you have to be very careful. At the national level, what will happen? At the national level, if the people are demanding for jobs, then at the national level, it has been decided that of the total money which is coming in for the development of, for provision of this rural youth employment guarantee, you cannot use the entire money for payment of wages. It was decided that there will be a component of wage. Suppose one state gets 1 crore rupees against the demand of the youth for jobs. Out of this 1 crore, only 60 lakh rupees can be paid in the form of wage, and another 40 lakh rupees will be meant for the provision of material goods. For example, if there is a construction of road, if there is a construction of bridge or construction of a canal, that means the money will be used in the ratio of 60 and 40. That is very important. Now, at the national level, this ratio, when it is worked out, it might be 65 is to 35. That means 65% of the total funds in the Manrega will be used for the purpose of wages. That means directly payment to the people, and 35% of the money will be used for the construction or for the material development or material purchase. Now, remember here that in the entire scheme, no private contractor is allowed. Here, look at it. Very important. No private contractor is to be allowed. That means jobs are to be created by the Public Works Department or NGOs. Many people do not know about all these things. And therefore, it is very important that you understand these issues very, very carefully. No private contractor is allowed under this. Now, what we find that over the years, there has been huge amount of money coming out. This year in the financial budget, when the budget was recently presented in the parliament, we found that there was a deduction in the money which is given to the states. Now, the finance minister is of the opinion that this is a demand-driven program. That means if more money is required, in the budget estimates, more funds will be provided. And therefore, we are positive that if more and more demands are there, more and more money will be made available. But for all of you to understand that yes, there was a reduction in the budget for the first time in the Manrega scheme, where the total money available in the previous years was reduced this year. Now, these are some broad issues which I wanted to share regarding a program which is run at the national level and which has been appreciated at the world level. At the world level. Now, coming back to another important issue, and though there are different programs, I can keep on talking about programs maybe related to electrification, maybe related to housing, maybe related to this OFD, but that will go a long way. Now I'll be focusing only coming back to you, and I'll share my screen once again to make things clear to you regarding precision. But before that, let me know, are things clear to my participants? Whatever we have discussed, are they very clear?
Yes, sir.
That we have programs of different kinds, including programs for social security, programs for rural housing, programs for employment, programs for infrastructure, programs for agriculture, programs for rural industry, right? I hope they have a broad idea about the different kinds of programs, and I shared one program in detail, so you are all aware of it. Coming back to the another topic, and that relates to your precision agriculture. I'll come to that directly. So friends, what we find that now we have a large number of issues that relates to the use of technology in agriculture. Normally I question people, do we want smart villages or do we want smart people in the villages? That you can think. That is what is very important, because I remember in our daily life we talk about smart people. Okay, so if people are smart, ultimately the villages will be smart. That means if we want our villages to be smart, what we visualize at the national level that we have people who are smart enough to use technology. That is what is very, very important. So friends, look at the very definition part of it. Precision agriculture is a management strategy that uses cutting edge technologies and tools. Three points must be kept in your mind, friends. When it comes to precision agriculture, we require three different kinds of wares. Very important to make things smart. We require hardware, very important. We require software, very important. And third, the manware. If we have hardware and software, but if you don't have manware, then nothing can become smart. Very important. That means if you have hardware, if you have, and I keep on giving examples on these points. For example, look at it. Suppose you say that you want your villages to be electrified, right? So what do, you decide that I am going to purchase a big transformer, I am going to purchase cables, I am going to purchase electric poles, I am going to purchase electric meters, and then in the end you find that there is no electricity. Complete failure. So what was there? Hardware was there, software is not there. So how will it do? It will not work. It will not work. So what you find? Hardware is there, software is also required. That is very important, very important. But then who will use it is important. Let me tell you. Recently in Bihar, there was a program where government and the policymakers wanted to ensure that there is no pilferage in the electricity, because a large number of people were connecting directly from the main lines and using it as the source of their light, a source of their cooking. So the advisors, they said that we require smart meters. We require smart meters. Now what does it mean? Now these smart meters will be now introduced across the country in our houses. It will be like your prepaid or postpaid mobiles. That means if you want to consume electricity, you will be given an option of prepaid. That means you are going to pay a fixed amount of money, and if you have consumed the total electricity against that payment, your meter will stop working. Very interesting. Very, very interesting, though very, very meaningful. Now, the objective was to stop the pilferages. But are people in the villages smart enough to keep record and be vigilant every day? How much is money left? How much is money left, or how much electricity can be consumed every day? Because the consumption of the electricity within the household will vary from day to day, from month to month, and from season to season. Now that kind of smartness will be possible only if you don't have literacy, but you have to improve number one, digital literacy. Remember, friends, I am talking about digital literacy. Without digital literacy, you cannot think of making your smart villages. Number one, there are villages in India where we find there is a serious problem of the digital divide. That means you might have a network, but there are very poor signals. Now, these issues need to be addressed. So, when we talk about the precision agriculture for smart villages, now look at it. It says that this is a cutting edge technologies and tools. Very big idea. Now, what will we do? To gather, process, and analyze information to enhance farm assessment. Very important, very nice. Why it is do? Why it was important? It was important because it was found that our farmers do not have enough of knowledge when to irrigate the farms, where to irrigate more or where to irrigate less, which crop requires more nutrition, which crop requires less nutrition, how much amount of nutrition should be there, what kind of seed is there, and what kind of nutrition is required, how much fertilizer is required. They are doing it, but they are not doing with precision. That means broader thinking was that there is huge amount of wastage, whether it is related to use of insecticides, use of pesticides, use of fertilizers, use of even seeds, because the way they were spreading the seeds, that it is not required. Sometimes a large number of seeds they go waste because they don't have the understanding of precision. That means we are thinking of using technology to minimize the wastage and maximize the profit or maximize the output. So it was to provide optimized agriculture input applications. This is very important. Input is very important. Considering crop and soil needs for improving productivity. Precision nutrient management, for example, can play an important role in agricultural production. However, precision agriculture adoption remains a major challenge and needs proper decision support systems developed using electronic sensors. Now look at it. What is the expectations? Expectations is that they have understanding about GPS, they have understanding of the GIS, they have understanding of VRT for its implementation. So this is possible only if we have technology enabled youth or technology enabled people are available in the rural areas. Therefore, precision agriculture technologies are intended to help farmers make more efficient use of crop inputs by following 5 R's. Now, 5 R's are very important. First R is called as right input. That means what is to be put in the field, either in the form of seeds, fertilizer, insecticide, pesticide, even water, whether you want to go for a sprinkler, whether you want to go for flood irrigation, whatever it is, that is very important. Number two, right amount. Number three, right place. Number four, right manner. That means the manner in which these things are to be done is equally important, friends. And that is very, very important issues. Now look at the right input. So optimizing the use of agricultural inputs does not always mean minimizing them. Many people may think that reduce the input. No, the purpose is not. The purpose is to increase the farm system's capacity and efficiency to maximize production and profit while also improving environmental quality and sustainability. According to the law of minimum, that is, if one growth factor of the nutrient is deficient, plant growth is limited, even if all other vital factors are adequate. It is necessary to determine the limiting factors and address them to improve plant growth. For example, if the deficient factor is nitrogen, after adding nitrogen to a sufficient level, there would be another factor, but nitrogen that limits the yield. So what is important here, that we must understand the right amount of or right input for the agriculture is to be done. Then right rate is important. So we have to identify the field variations from, because the fertility is going to vary from field to field. Remember, Prime Minister in one of its speeches said that more food or per drop of water, right? That was for irrigation purposes. That means the very method of irrigating the fields in India through flood irrigation is not a conducive method of agriculture. Friends, I was in Israel and I'm aware that even in the desert-like conditions, they are producing very good quality fruits, very good quality grains. Now, in our case, what we find that in some areas, because of unawareness, our farmers do not know how to irrigate. For example, in Panjab and Haryana, you will find that during the winter months, the entire fields are completely covered with water. In summers, the same thing happens, right? For example, if they're growing paddy, the paddy fields are fully watered, sometimes even when it is not required. So huge amount of water is wastage, and now they are facing problem of the depletion of underground water. So if you are not aware, you are going to waste a lot of these resources. So identifying the field variations and determining the right amount of input is required to optimize agriculture practices that utilize variable rate input applications instead of uniform applications to improve input use efficiency. Friends, you may not be aware, but at the national level, policymakers have decided that they want the farmers to use technologies like drones. Now, what will the drone do it? So, in place of spreading insecticides and pesticides manually in the field, the drones will be prepared that the exact amount of required the insecticides and pesticides can be spread in the over the crops. Here, what you find, that the farmer will be not in touch with the insecticides and pesticides. That means the health hazards can be minimized. But then running a drone, flying a drone is to be first taught to the person, and therefore we are looking forward for training of farmers for the use of drones. In certain cases where some farmers were very inquisitive to use the drones, what they did, their drones got stuck in the trees, their drones got stuck in the electric wires, and at many places there were short circuits only because they never knew how to use the drones. So it is not so easy. It is not so easy that you start playing with it. And sometimes they destroyed it because it hit some targets because they were not having proper control on the drones. So these are the issues which are very important. Similarly, for right time and right place, I will not be discussing in detail. I hope I have given you a broad idea about what precision agriculture means and what kind of preparation is required right now in the country. Without the preparations, we cannot think of making it successful. And in order to do that, friends, we need to be very proactive. So I'll stop here and ask my participants to ask me as difficult questions as possible, because maybe I will be able to address their questions and some of their queries which will help them and benefit them. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.